Hey guys, welcome again to the Ignite Discipleship podcast, where we talk about making disciples doing the things that you're already doing. So we have our fearless leader here, Dan Greiner. How's your week been, Dan?
Hey, it's been great. It's good to be with everybody. Hey, couldn't wait to get back with you guys.
Yeah, cool. And I'm Kevin Beasley here in the Nashville area. And then we have our faithful, loyal producer, who's always on top of his game, Asher Coker. So how's your week been, Asher?
It's been good. I'm enjoying some pre-fall weather and excited about actual fall weather.
It's coming. It's coming.
It is so nice these days. And it just makes you want to kind of just get out and be more active, huh?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I just wish we could freeze these days and just have 365 of those. But hey, we love them while they're here. So.
Yep, for sure. Well, hey, speaking of getting out and being active, my kids love to get out and ride their bicycles. And bicycle time, the first time you get a bicycle is such an exciting time in life. I'm not really sure why. I watch my kids each time we get them their first bike. And even my little 3-year-old, we got her a little tricycle for her birthday. And it's just like this new sense of freedom. Like for the first time, you can just be free to move faster and just not be as like isolated into one spot. It's such a fun time of life. I don't know if I've ever told much about my history on the podcast, but I grew up in pretty extreme poverty in North Alabama, in rural Alabama. And so we really getting a bicycle was a huge, huge deal. Like it wasn't a little thing for us. And I can still remember the guy we purchased our first bicycle from. This was probably 1980, 82 or 1983. And there was a little guy that had a bike repair shop in his home. And his yard was just mountains of bicycles. And I remember walking through the guy's yard and trying to pick out my favorite bicycle. And it was this old, this was, early 80s. And this is probably a bicycle from the late 60s or early 70s. But it looked so cool. And I remember picking that bicycle out, and the guy would not actually repair the bike until it was sold. So we paid for it, and then he repaired it, and we went and picked it up a couple of days later. And just the exhilaration of the first time trying to ride that bicycle. But it didn't happen quickly, right? It's a process. But what about, was that the same experience with you guys? Was that a magical time of life?
A bicycle was freedom for me. I was able to escape my family, and that had another set of conversation. But I would drive to neighboring towns. I went miles on my bicycle. I would put playing cards on the spokes held by and you could hear me coming from 2 streets away. I thought it was a motorcycle. In fact, I even was a professional photographer as a kid, and I covered a major event I was the AP stringer. And so I went and covered this event like 8 miles away on my bicycle. And when I pulled up, it was the Gannett Media Mogul. And this Media Mogul had all these people from Chicago Tribune, all these, New York Times, and I was the AP stringer, and I'm a 12-year-old kid on a bicycle. And they said, "Get out of here, kid." I said, "I'm the AP stringer." I was at the front of the line. I was the #1 photographer covering this event, but I covered it on my bicycle with my playing cards in the spokes. And that was just my life. I lived on my bicycle. I ran a business on my bicycle. So it was pretty important to me.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Asher? You remember your first bike?
I don't remember the first bike, but I remember being younger, and I grew up in the 90s, kind of pre-internet in everybody's home. So bikes and skateboards, they were pretty big. And my family went camping a lot. So we'd go around like East Tennessee, Cades Cove, Frozen Head State Park. And I just remember riding for hours and hours, and then fishing and not catching anything. So then riding some more.
Yeah. We actually, Dan and I have been talking the last couple of weeks. We use this analogy when we teach this principle we're going to talk about today, but it's less common. Bicycles are less common these days. There are hoverboards and, electric scooters and all different kinds of means of child transportation. But yeah, it's kind of sad that the bicycle has lost a little bit of its flair.
Well, I've read an article that said that about 60% of kids will ride a bicycle. Like
Wow.
40% of kids will never learn to ride a bicycle. So now, they're training kids how to ride bikes without training wheels so they can learn to coast. And it's a whole new way of learning, which they actually ride faster, because what they're realizing is kids don't want to fool with training wheels. The training wheels actually discourage them. So it just becomes garage trash for people when they have a bicycle that they don't ever ride, and they just sell it in the yard sale, and the kid never learns to ride a bike. That's a tragedy, isn't it? So
Yeah, it is.
well, we're going to talk today about how riding a bike actually relates to this process, right? I mean, because if you've ever ridden a bike, what happens is you saw another kid ride a bike, right? And you want to ride a bike, or maybe you have brothers and sisters that ride a bike, and you saw it as freedom for them. But just riding a bike just balance isn't all there is, right? So there's what we call the assist model. You have to model it, first of all, and then you have to assist the person to ride it. And that's the part where kids are falling off the cliff, and they're not really learning to ride a bike because there's no one really, parents aren't assisting them like they did in the past. The training wheels really aren't working. We live in a culture where kids are in a different rhythm, and we're not trashing parents, but parents just don't have the same time and values to ride a bike. It's just, and in fact, parents don't even want their kids riding a bike because they want to. Sometimes there's kind of, you need to put them on the helmet and put them in a bubble suit. And, there's just a lot of things. So, it's not like things were even just 15, 20 years ago where kids used it as freedom. So as a result, there's this modeling that's somewhat absent. There's assisting that's somewhat absent. And then there's the coaching of how to ride this bike that's absent. So that means that a lot of kids just aren't even riding bikes these days, which is sad.
And interestingly, what kids are doing well is playing video games, right? So
awesome at that.
Yeah. The last few years, I have just really, worked hard to connect with my teenage boys, and one of the things I started doing is playing video games with them because it's just a connection point. But the interesting thing about that is, the father thinks of himself as the authority figure, but actually becomes a student. So I'll get on the, online and play with a few of one of my boys and some of his friends. I remember the first few times I started playing Fortnite with him online. And literally there would be a kid. They all call me dad on the headset. They're all calling me, hey dad, do this, do that. And they're coaching me. They're the models. They're modeling for me how to play this game, and they're actually coaching me along. My boy still laughs about this one, but I remember one of his little friends saying, hey dad, just hide under the staircase until we kill everybody, and then you can come out, in the Fortnite game. So it's almost role reversal. It's almost that there's new technology that we don't understand, and we don't know how to ride that bike. And it's role reversal, and they're actually having to model and assist for us, which, is a little bit scary for our culture.
But it's just the shift that's happening. So this whole idea, though, the reason why we're introducing this is this model assist coach is absolutely the central part of what Jesus did. And if we don't have it in our disciple making cultures and in our ministries and how we're leading our lives, it's not. In fact, we're going to be missing a big part of really developing the next generation of either disciples or kids, or it ripples into everything we do, right? And even when you look at our educational system, there's a lot of information transfer, but there's not a lot of training. And so, teaching is different from training, right? We talk about that. That you can teach someone. We use this illustration sometimes, like try teaching someone to tie their shoes with a microphone across the room. No one ever taught their kid, here's how first of all, you don't ever teach your kid that way. You put your arm around them and you model them for them, and then you assist them. You kind of take their hands through the process, and then you coach them, and then they do it on their own. That's how we do everything. We really, if we're going to learn something, we have to have a training process. And that's what we're talking with bikes. That's what's missing in riding bike. But your son actually did it the right way. They actually trained you and they were working with you in that process with Fortnite, right? So there's an intuitive piece to this, but sometimes we violate the kind of the core principles of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so if you want just a high level overview of the core principles, we're going to put this up on our screen. And just as of last month, we're videotaping these podcasts. And so you can find them on YouTube, on our YouTube channel at Ignite Disciple Making. So if you just search for Ignite Disciple Making and find our channel, we'll have these posted so you can see the graphics if you need to. But just as a high level, when you think about, as a parent at least 20 years ago and 10 years ago, teaching your kid to ride a bicycle, what got them so excited about learning how to ride a bicycle is watching another child. And so another child riding a bicycle became a model for them. And then maybe you have a bicycle and you hop on and you just kind of show them how the whole process works and ride up and down the sidewalk as they're watching you. And then the next step is you sit them on the seat, you show them all the controls, the brakes and the pedals and how it works. And then you kind of just walk alongside them, holding up the bicycle and balancing for them. And so you're really empowering them to do something that they can't do themselves yet, which is a really cool process as well. And they're leaning into you and they're trusting that you're going to kind of walk them through this process. And then at some point, it's time to go for it. And so you let them go and let them kind of slide down the sidewalk. And typically they're going to fall over the first time, right? They're going to go a few feet and turn sideways, and it's going to take some time for them to figure out how to keep their balance. But you're assisting them, and then you're beginning to release them into this process until finally they feel confident and you feel confident and you can actually send them on their way. And so we've kind of gone back and forth on how we've communicated this. We started model, assist, watch, and leave, but we've kind of tweaked it to the point where we're kind of sitting at model, show someone how to do something, assist, help them do it, coach them along the process, and just give them insight, and then send them, which we like the word send because it takes us back to the Jesus model, right? Where he's sending his disciple makers into new cities 2 by 2 to find persons of peace. So model, assist, coach, and send, which we call the MAX process.
And that is really something that is so practical and logical, and it's like so duh. But think about how much have you had the model, assist, coach, send given to you in your disciple making journey, or in your Jesus journey, or in just learning how to know who Jesus is and follow him. It's much more microphones and teaching and lecture. And so it's really a system that Jesus gave us that's intuitive to what we do. It's so logical. It makes sense. It's almost silly that we even have to do a podcast on this, but we need more than just even a podcast. We really have to retrain a whole new culture of Jesus followers so that we're going to become like Jesus and follow him and imitate him.
And one of the reasons we decided to spotlight this topic this month is because we've been kind of looking at our network over the past couple of months and realizing that we have reproduced really good disciple teachers who know how to train these principles and teach people the principles, but we might be a little bit weak in people who are actually modeling disciple making and doing it themselves. And you're going to reproduce who you are. That's just how human nature and biology even works, right? And so if we're not modeling and being disciple makers ourselves, then we're not going to see disciple makers multiplied. The principle that we point back to in the Ignite Network is that in order to make disciples, you must first be the disciple. And we want to just encourage you and inspire you to actually think about how are you modeling this for the disciple makers in your network.
And as we do this, what we realized was that this model assist coach isn't just a one-time thing, Kevin. It's not just like, let's just model assist. And because in the past, it's like, we almost used a bad example of like, well, if I'll just model this, then you'll just put it all together and you'll just naturally make the connections. And that's where there has to be the assisting. You have to, and one of the things that we do in our trainings a lot, Kevin, is we say, okay, let's break it down. Let's do an autopsy of what we just did. What did you see me do just in that moment? And in that process of saying, what did you see me do? What did you hear me do? Then you're assisting them to begin to not just watch you and observe you, because if you only have it modeled for them, what happens is it actually intimidates them. Mm-hmm. Modeling actually can be very detrimental if that's all you do, because you're saying, I've got to model this. You have to make all the connections. You have to find all the information so you understand my skills and my tools and what I'm doing, what's underlying it. and I'm not going to help you. You've got to go figure that out on your own, grasshopper. And so it's really discouraging to people. So they're like, oh man, I suck at this. I'm so bad at this. You're awesome. And people go, yes, I'm awesome. Of course I'm awesome, because and it's like it's almost got a cycle of that puts people on platforms and makes people underlings. And it's an over-under process that has been endemic in the church culture. And no one meant to do this. It was modeled, and it was just kept being modeled and reproduced, right? So the modeling is so critical, and we're doing a lot of modeling, but that's where we stop. So you'll say, of course I model. I do this. I model all the time. You get no credit if you just model. That's failure. That makes, the grasshopper feel very frustrated and feel like I have to just celebrate you. And so the assisting is the critical thing that we've got to really break down. And the reason why we say let's autopsy this is because there's behaviors that were happening right there that I'm aware of. Were you aware of them? Why do you think I did that? And begin to ask them questions and help them think through the process of what do you think is going on? How would you do that? And assisting them to, and it really, it slows it way down. And it's like, if you'll slow it down, people can learn it. If you ever watched a YouTube video, at least when I'm watching a YouTube video, trying to figure out how to fix something, I'm hitting that pause button all the time going, okay, then I hit play. I'm back and forth, like, and I'm back and forth because I need to figure this thing out. And his hands were there instead of there. Oh, that's it worked. It worked. But so we do that right inherently in YouTube. But how do you get a teacher to go pause? So that what's going on now? That's that assisting. So
yeah.
critical.
And Dan, I haven't heard you use a single chapter and verse yet from the Gospels. However, you just told the story of how Jesus made disciples, right? Exactly. And so he would just go around and he would just be looking for people willing to follow. Follow me, follow me, follow me. And he said, follow me. And follow is a very passive activity, right? Follow just means walk with me, travel with me, and watch what I do. So that's the model portion of Jesus's disciple making. But the assist portion, which was what you were just describing, was the moments when he would tell a story to the crowds, and then he would pull his key leaders aside and explain what he was trying to communicate, right? So he would take a parable and he would break it down for them so that they would understand. And then he would let them start to share it with others to the point where he was able to actually send them out in the Luke passages where he sent them out 2 by 2. Both the 12 and the 72. And so it was an ongoing process of watch me do this, and then let me pull you off to the side and kind of dial it, kind of explain it to you what we mean by this. And then I don't know how accurate this is, but there's a scene in the third season of The Chosen where Jesus is teaching the crowds, and the crowd gets so large that his voice can't carry far enough. And so he has his disciples go out like 100 feet, 100 feet, 100 feet. And as he would yell out the story, 100 feet, the next disciple would yell the story after him. And then the next disciple would yell the story so the crowd of thousands of people could hear the story. I think that's an amazing picture of assist, right? Where Jesus is modeling, and then they're actually taking his message and amplifying it to a broader crowd until they were able to do it themselves. Isn't that beautiful?
It is. And like he tells this parable of the soils to a fairly large crowd. And then he pulls his disciples aside and says, do you understand what I just said? And they go, oh, we have no clue. We have no clue what you know. And he goes, okay. And he breaks it down and explains it to them. And then they go, oh, we still don't understand. And even there's times he would go, why are you so dull in your hearing? In other words, he would ask them questions like, this assisting is difficult. So I've got to coach you, take the next level of coaching you. And the coaching is, why do you think you're not getting this? Mm-hmm. He put it on them. There's a reason why you're not getting this. Can you help me break down what's going on? And then he would he would then begin to have them apply it and just talking among themselves. And as they'd be walking, they'd be talking among themselves. He'd say, I hear you talking among yourselves. He'd begin to break it down further. And he would say, what are you talking about? And because he was coaching them, and he was stop and go, okay, let's just stop right here. Let's talk about this. And then he said, well, what were you talking among yourselves about? He goes, well, we were talking about who's going to be greatest in the kingdom. Okay. We need to really drill down this. And he really gives them a 400 level course in what it means to be great in the kingdom of God, which was really very disturbing to them. But he let them live in the tension. Part of coaching is letting them live in the tension, letting them not have it all perfect, right? I mean, if you've ever had a coach, they made you do wind sprints, they made you do, curls, you're doing different kinds of things, you're building certain muscles, and then you apply it, and then when you don't get it right, then they say, okay, we're going to do that drill again, we're going to do it. And coaching is just going over the basics, helping them get the basics. So that coaching is a whole different level even than assisting. It's like, okay, we're assisting you, but we're going to have to really go after this in a very deliberate kind of way.
And since we're on the coaching phase and taking it back to our bicycle analogy, assisting, you can assist everyone the same way. Like I hold the bicycle and I push the kid down the hill, and I know he's not going to fall or she's not going to fall because I'm holding the bicycle. It's like it's the same process I have 5 children, so it's been the same process for all 5 kids. But the next phase of coaching is very individualized. So I had one kid that couldn't figure out how to do the balance, but then the next kid would go right down the hill balance, but didn't know how to use the brakes, and so crash trying to figure out how to stop the thing. And then another kid that couldn't actually, there's a point at the top of the pedal cycle where it's hard to get over the top, get over the top of the pedal cycle. And so each of one of those kids, when you got the coaching phase, each required a unique process, a unique set of information based on what they were struggling with. And so and again, we have to have this in full effect in the model phase, so that I've wrestled with all these issues, and I've come to conclusion on how I'm going to overcome obstacles in order to uniquely work with each of our individual disciple makers on the obstacles that they have. So some of your disciples may have trouble, doing milk versus meat, but the next disciple may nail the milk versus meat, but really struggle with, asking open-ended questions. And it's an individual process, and which requires us, as our principle goes, requires us to spend more time with fewer people to get better results.
I had a quick question for you all as you're talking through this, because I relate everything back to teaching music lessons, of course, and it's a very like one-on-one kind of process. But a lot of times I'll show a student, a pattern to play or a part of a song, and then they'll practice it for a week, and then they'll come back. And what I'll do is say, hey, now you try to teach that back to me and just see kind of how accurate they get it, and or even just what their interpretation is, because everyone's a little different. Is that something that happens at any point in that coaching process, like the bicycle kind of model? I really like that analogy.
Yeah. Well, it really, in some ways, what you're doing there is you're doing a very gentle send. What you're saying is, okay, I've modeled this for you, I've assisted, I've coached you in this, but now I want to see how you're doing on this. So we're sending you're on your own. I'm not doing this for you, but hey, you're not in front of thousands of people, or you're not in the recording studio, where you've got a recording contract in the line. But you do need to play this, and you're on your own. And now we're going to go right back into the model assist coach, because I model this for you, but there's something you're missing. I need to model this unique out this, and so you break it down to even a more nuanced level. Your first model assist coach is kind of high level. Your next model assist coach is breaking down, okay, you're weak in this area. I need to model this for you, assist you, coach you, and you get that, and as you keep moving down the funnel, if you would, you build skill. Now you're at a 400 level, 500 level model assist coach. You're not at a 100 level. These are sticks. This is a drum head. This is how you hold it. You're all way beyond that. Now you're talking about nuances. And that's that's how you teach lessons. And you probably never really thought too much about that funnel. Maybe you did, but You're a good coach and you're a good teacher because of that, Asher.
Maybe so.
Is that
Hopefully.
yeah? Yeah, it's cool. And so the main thing we want to kind of just encourage in today again is that there's one really easy uh, phase of this model, the skip, right, Dan? The easiest phase to skip is
Easy.
that model phase, especially when you're disciple making, because disciple making can be, especially in the early stages of disciple making, can be very difficult and require a lot of work. And so if there's any phase of this that's going to be really easy to skip, we believe that it's going to be the model phase. But the reverse side, the flip side of that coin, is the model phase is absolutely the most important part of the phases, or the most important phase. So we're going to commit as a network and as a disciple making culture over the next year to really dial into this model side of the coin, this model phase. And so, Dan, what are some ways that some of our network members can begin to practice this model phase of the model assist coach cycle?
If you're still continuing to teach, you're not modeling, right? The modeling is requiring training. And so it's just like using the tying the shoestring. You have to instead of using a microphone across the room, you have to put your arms around, come beside the person, get close. It takes proximity. You cannot model from a distance, and that's the misnomer, I think, right? In the Christian world, a lot of times we think modeling is I'm going to set the example. I'm a role model, but no, that's a whole different conversation. It's actually getting up close. That's an excuse for distance, right? I'm a role model. That's a distance thing. Actual modeling is up close. And so just thinking, okay, I've got to be intentional. And this is one of the things we tell a lot of our disciple makers is if you don't know what you're doing right, you will not be able to reproduce this in your disciples. I mean, so a lot of our leaders are just natural at spiritual conversations and they're good at it. Kevin, you are one of the most natural spiritual conversationalists I've ever seen, but it's not going to do anyone any good in your culture unless you know why you're good, unless you know what you're doing that's right. So a lot of times in training, I'll say, okay, you've got to stop this and break down. I love what you're doing. This isn't you're doing it wrong. You've got to do it right. You're doing it right. Do you know why you're doing it right? Have you thought about why you're doing it right? Have you broken that down? If you've never broken it down, you'll never reproduce it. You'll just become, I mean, how many people are like Michael Jordan? Not many, right? Michael Jordan's a freak athlete. Michael Jordan does not know how to teach people to play basketball the way he does. He just is that way. I'm not trashing Michael Jordan. He's not a good disciple maker or a good teacher because there's no one in his lineage who played anywhere close to Michael Jordan. He's just been the greatest, and he stays at the greatest. And he kind of likes being the greatest. There's something about Michael Jordan that kind of enjoys it, and there's something in sometimes some of us in Christian leadership, we love being the Michael Jordan of our church or our tribe, and we kind of don't really want other people coming along. So, I've got to be the disciple. I've got to be submitted to Jesus. He's got to come alive in me. I've got to stop being the hero, and I've got to stop being the guy on the pedestal, our girl on the pedestal.
It's interesting when you were talking about Michael Jordan. I started thinking about LeBron James and little Bronny coming up. Like that. That's a good example of a dad that was a master athlete who's investing it in his son, right? So that's interesting contrast between those two. So what I was thinking about is the fact, and we talk about this a little bit when we talk about the APEST model, the apostle, prophet, evangelist, shepherd, and teacher. Whatever you're primary in, you assume that everyone else is good at that, right? So my wife is an evangelist, and she has a temptation, or did 20 years ago, she had a temptation to look down upon people that didn't value evangelism, because she's so good at it and so passionate about it, that if anyone else wasn't as good or wasn't as passionate, literally she would question their faith. Are they really following Jesus, right? So our human flesh assumes that if I'm really skilled in something, everyone else ought to be. There's no reason for them not to be. And so we overlook that. That's where we overlook the coach process. And so, but one of the thing we have to do is like take our sweet spots and not just give it to the world, but give it to our disciple makers. So, for example, we have a disciple maker in our culture that's been with me for a while, for almost 5 years now, and I will listen to him ask questions. I'm watching him and assisting him and coaching others right now. And he will say the same exact thing that I would say to him 3 years ago, and so like I have to make sure that the questions I'm asking my disciple makers, and not even that, but especially what they're watching me do on the mission field, when I'm on the mission field asking questions and telling stories, I need to make sure that they're seeing me do the same behaviors that I would expect them to do without looking down upon them for the fact they don't have those skills yet, right? So I can't write them off because they don't have those skills yet. So probably I would guess the best bike riders in the world, like you just said, Dan, are probably the least patient with their children when their children can't get it. Why can't you get this, right? And so I think for us personally, the easiest phase to skip is the model phase. But if we don't like have a good viewpoint about how to coach people and assist people through skill building, then we're not going to reproduce ourselves. It's just going to fall as a dead end. And the enemy would love that. The enemy would love for us to keep our skills to ourselves, right?
And I love that you made this. This is the first core point: is that it's projection. You project your gift on other people, and you assume that everyone has that gift. And the enemy uses that to keep the gospel bound up in one person. He doesn't care if you're a genius evangelist. One genius evangelist is not a threat to his demonic kingdom. But if you learn to actually not project and to begin to actually use Jesus as disciple making method where you model this, you break it down, assist and coach, there is a major threat to the gates of hell. And Jesus said, hey, the gates of hell is not going to keep this puppy back. We're breaking those things down. And but we have to not project and not celebrate our gifts. And so one of the greatest obstacles to the gospel moving forward really is our own giftedness, which is just what you said. Julie's evangelistic gift is wonderful. While it's wonderful, it can also be the major obstacle to her spiritual growth, her kingdom advance, and the gospel moving forward, and where she's actually being used in a significant way. And that doesn't make sense, right? In the human realm, it's like, no, she's a superstar. Well, Jesus doesn't need superstars. In fact, Paul says in 1 Corinthians, look, not many of you are noble character. Not many of you are that gifted and talented. Let's face it, you're not that big a deal. But the Father is a big deal, and he wants to use you. And he is glorified when you're not such a big deal. He's made great in your weakness, Paul says in another passage. And those are important concepts that are really kind of, again, 101 level disciple making elements. But man, it is, we talk about the very top of the process. The very first thing you do is we have to become the reproducing disciple. And that's this concept. So there's model, assist, coach in each of these qualities here of embracing the commission of Jesus. We have our multiplication cycle, so you should look in the show notes or even watch on the YouTube channel. So if you're going to embrace the commission of Jesus, you have to learn how. You have to have it modeled for you. What does embracing the commission of Jesus look like? What does it mean to assist someone to really embrace what Jesus commissioned us to do, and then coaching them? That's not a small thing. That's a huge thing. And then you move to the next phase, if you will, the next module, and then you have to change what you care about. You have to model what that looks like, assist the person to change what they care about, and coach them. So it's model, assist, coach isn't a one-time thing. It's a progressive step-by-step down the funnel, just like we were talking about earlier with Asher, with his drum lessons, music lessons.
It kind of reminded me when you were talking about like Michael Jordan, LeBron James. It's almost like showing your work in math for a math problem. Because I remember in like 8th or 9th grade, we started to be able to use like a graphing calculator, and it was like, great, this is a shortcut for everything. And then the teachers were like, yeah, you still have to show your work. And we were like, this is the worst. Why did we spend $100 on this stupid calculator? And then we got to play games on them, so I feel like it was worth it. But the whole showing your work kind of thing is like, well, am I just doing this without really thinking about it, like Michael Jordan, or can I actually teach this to somebody else and reproduce it? So it makes sense, and that's the world I'm in with teaching, because a lot of those kids are in math class right now, and they're like, we hate it. I was like, nothing has changed.
But
Yeah.
Michael Jordan, in fact, there's this whole series of TV, a series that's been done on him, but he had an entire team behind him. And a lot of people have celebrated the team that he built as a trainer. And then he got Phil Jackson in, and all this, he had all these people on his team, but they were only about making Michael the greatest. That was the only purpose, was to make Michael the greatest. And what happens? Michael finally got old. Michael couldn't do it any longer. Michael may be the greatest, but he did have, he could have had so many if he hadn't played baseball. 5 NBA in a row, championships in a row. But the point is, that may never be topped. That may be the greatest, but he still got old. He still retired, and now he's an old man sitting in Charlotte on the sidelines watching basketball, and barely can walk. His walking is not that. He's got a kind of a hitch in his step, and he's not the greatest. He can get in and out of a car now. That's cool, and he can play golf, but he'll eventually be in a wheelchair. He'll be an old guy, and he'll all those skills will be completely diminished. And so, what do you have? And so, the point is, a lot of times we have counselors and people and coaches to make us the best that we can be. And that's never the kingdom of God. The kingdom of God is always, how can we reproduce this in you? And I don't know of anything else, Kevin, in the world that is really focused on passing it on so you can pass it on, so you can pass it on. And then in that process, you grow and you become who Christ wants you to be. I mean, it's kind of a unique piece. And in some ways, it's how the whole world was meant to be, but it's not much of how the world operates.
Yeah. So as we kind of wrap up this episode, we just want to encourage you again. As we're coaching people, including myself being coached by my coach, and I start saying things like, well, I just don't know why these guys aren't committing to a half day of prayer. I don't know why these guys aren't asking questions to lead to spiritual conversations in the places where they live, work, and play. The very first place we need to look is back at ourselves, right? Am I modeling half days of prayers for my community? Am I modeling asking questions in the places where I live, work, and play? And so this whole process that we're talking about today, Model Assist Coach and Lead, Model Assist Coach and Send, is less about the challenges that you have with your disciple makers and more about looking in the mirror and seeing if you're being the model, if you're being the disciple that you're hoping to reproduce or that God's wanting to reproduce in you. So we just encourage you, especially we're focusing this month on half day of prayer. So if you don't have a half day of prayer on the calendar, pull your calendar out as soon as you hit the stop button on this podcast and find a half a day, a 4-hour time slot where you can get alone with the Lord and ask him. We call it a staff meeting with Jesus, and ask him, what's the next step for you individually as a modeler and also for your community as a disciple making multiplication effort. So we want to encourage you to do that. And as we wrap up this episode, Dan, you have anything else you'd like to share with us as we close?
Well, I also encourage you, if you want the information on the half day of prayer, we'll put it in our show notes. And if you get on our app, if you go on our website, ignitedisciplemaking.com, you can click on information there. We have modules, training modules, and we have content there available for you to check out. Check out our different training approaches. We encourage you to start with module 1 and move through this process, but there's all kinds of ways. If you're further in the process, in module 4, the very first thing in module 4 is the half day of prayer notes. And so it's built in and kind of baked into our system. And we would love to help start, if you've not ever started this process formally, to help you learn how to grow as a disciple and take those first steps. We'd love to have a conversation with you and help you get started.
Yeah, that's right. So you can actually find us on Facebook if that's easy for you, or Instagram. And then we have hours of content on our YouTube channel. So hop on there and just watch content as long as you want. And then if you want a deeper dive and actually start to plug into the network, you can find us on our website, ignitedisciplemaking.com. There's a place where you can join the network and get access into what we call our app, where you can find lots more content and training materials. So, wow, thanks, guys. I'm tired. That was a good conversation.
Good.
Full of energy, power packed. So Thank you guys for joining us today. And remember that making disciples is only as hard as doing the things that you're already doing every day. It's just a mindset shift, changing what you care about, and starting to ask good questions and tell good stories. So thanks for joining us. Again, you can find us at ignitedisciplemaking.com or Ignite Disciple Making on YouTube, and we'll look forward to seeing you next month. So until then, God bless you, and let's go make disciples.